R. Kelly was saying that Jay-Z funded his downfall plus the documentary.
It may sound outrageous, but he felt like Jay-Z wanted to get him for.
The situation surrounding R. Kelly doesn't exist in a vacuum. When you trace the trajectory of his career, his legal battles, and the recent filings exposing alleged plots against him, a broader pattern begins to emerge. A pattern that spans decades and touches some of the most powerful figures in the music and entertainment industries. To truly understand what Kelly is alleging, it's crucial to examine the historical context, the key players, and the events that set the stage for what some insiders are now calling a coordinated effort to suppress his testimony. Consider the 2004 collapse of the Best of Both Worlds tour. At the time, it was widely characterized as a clash of titans, two megastars, R. Kelly and Jay-Z, whose professional ambitions collided in a high-stakes spectacle. Publicly, the narrative focused on ego clashes and creative differences, culminating in a widely reported backstage altercation in which Kelly claimed that someone on Jay-Z's team had threatened him with a firearm and physically assaulted him. He was pepper-sprayed, restrained, and ultimately removed from the scene. To fans and casual observers, it was a dramatic but isolated incident. To insiders, however, the incident reads like a rehearsal for the kind of control that would come to define how the industry deals with its liabilities. Kelly's filing, when viewed in light of that tour, suggests that the tactics used against him today have historical precedent. That 2004 incident wasn't merely a confrontation, it was a demonstration of power. It showed what happens when someone crosses the invisible lines of the entertainment world. When Kelly threatened to expose the inner workings of this tightly controlled ecosystem, the reaction was swift and uncompromising. The legal documents now submitted allege that these same mechanisms, control, intimidation, and suppression, are being applied even while he is incarcerated. The timing of his overdose, hospitalization, and immediate placement into solitary confinement mirrors the way the industry has historically neutralized threats, quickly, decisively, and with an eye toward containment. The pattern becomes even more evident when considering the subsequent actions taken against Kelly post-tour. After the Best of Both Worlds tour imploded, he filed a $75 million lawsuit, citing damages to his career and reputation. While the lawsuit never reached a public verdict, it was settled quietly, with terms shielded from the public eye. This settlement, like so many others in the music industry, functioned less as justice and more as a mechanism to silence. Then came the controversial documentary that emerged years later, a production whose funding insiders claim involved Jay-Z himself, which effectively destroyed what remained of Kelly's career and public image. Again, the narrative spun was framed as accountability or artistic critique, but the underlying strategy was about control, controlling the story, controlling the exposure, and controlling the end result, a once dominant figure rendered powerless. Kelly's filings suggest that this pattern didn't end there. Over the past 6 months, he has allegedly documented and shared information about private gatherings, hidden recordings, and networks of powerful individuals who believed themselves untouchable. These were not the tapes that led to his trials in the early 2000s. These were new, private, and potentially explosive, capturing behavior that insiders long assumed would never be exposed. According to his legal team, it is precisely the potential release of these materials that prompted the extreme response from the prison system, the overdose, the rapid hospitalization, and the isolation. Each element fits a pattern observed throughout Kelly's career. When a threat to the system emerges, it is neutralized quickly, decisively, and with coordination. Industry veterans suggest that the timing of recent events cannot be separated from the broader context of legal troubles surrounding other figures. 2 weeks before Kelly's collapse, Sean Diddy Combs received a federal sentence related to orchestrated encounters involving non-consenting participants. While Kelly's filings don't explicitly tie him to Combs' actions, insiders suggest that Kelly may have been a witness or participant in the broader environment where these activities occurred. If true, the urgency in silencing him is understandable, not merely as a personal threat, but as a threat to a network of influential individuals with reputations, careers, and freedom at stake. Then there's the question of Jay-Z, whose involvement in past incidents, from the 2004 tour to the funding of documentaries, situates him squarely within this ecosystem of influence and control. Kelly's filings insinuate that when someone of Jay-Z's stature is implicated, the stakes extend beyond personal vendetta. They become systemic, affecting how narratives are managed across the industry. Legal scholars reviewing the filings argue that what Kelly is describing is not limited to isolated acts of retaliation. It is, in fact, evidence of a broader strategy, a system designed to manage threats, silence dissent, and protect the status and interests of high-profile individuals at any cost. The documents themselves are meticulous. They include medical records suggesting that the overdose was not accidental, security logs indicating the rapid transfer to solitary confinement, and sworn declarations from individuals claiming knowledge of a conspiracy within the prison. These filings do not operate in a vacuum. They point to a deliberate intersection between Kelly's revelations and external actors with the means to influence outcomes, even within the federal prison system. This aligns with the historical pattern of suppression and control that has defined Kelly's public and private experiences for nearly 2 decades. The narrative emerging from these filings underscores a harsh truth about the entertainment industry. Success and influence often come with an implicit contract of silence. The same mechanisms that elevate stars, access to resources, connections to powerful allies, and public adoration are also used to control, manipulate, and suppress those who threaten the status quo. Kelly's claims suggest that when the system perceives a threat, it acts swiftly, combining legal maneuvers, media influence, and, in this case, potentially lethal interventions to neutralize the risk. In essence, Kelly's recent ordeal reflects a continuation of a decades-long strategy: control, neutralization, and containment. Whether through lawsuits, documentaries, or prison interventions, the methods remain consistent. And the pattern is not just about Kelly himself. It is about a network of influential figures whose careers, reputations, and power are maintained through the careful orchestration of who speaks, who remains silent, and who is effectively removed from the equation. Kelly's filing, therefore, is more than a legal document. It is a roadmap of the mechanisms that protect power in the music industry. It reveals a system that prioritizes the maintenance of control over the administration of justice. And as the narrative unfolds, the critical question becomes not whether Kelly's claims are credible, but whether the system that has protected these figures for decades will continue to suppress the truth, or whether the dominoes are finally set to fall.
These victims overcame Mr. Kelly's abuse. They deserve to be recognized. Know this: we stand here today because of them. Without them, today would not have been accomplished. Today is their day.
Kelly is no longer just a man serving a prison sentence. According to his legal team, he has become something far more dangerous to the system that once protected him, a liability that needs to disappear. For years, the assumption was simple: a 30-year federal sentence marked the end of the story. The music industry had finally closed the chapter, distanced itself from the damage, and moved forward as if the problem had been resolved. But that assumption shattered the moment a new legal filing landed on the federal docket. This filing didn't argue innocence. It didn't attempt to relitigate the crimes that led to his conviction. Instead, it introduced a far more disturbing claim, that Kelly's life is in immediate danger, not because of other inmates acting independently, but because prison officials themselves allegedly enabled a plot to silence him permanently. According to the motion, correctional staff recruited members of the Aryan Brotherhood, one of the most violent white supremacist prison gangs in the United States, to eliminate Kelly before he could disclose sensitive information involving powerful individuals who have never faced accountability. The allegation is explosive, not only because of the gang named, but because of the timing attached to it. Kelly's attorneys claim that shortly after he began cooperating with legal efforts that could expose others, a chain of events unfolded with alarming precision. First came a sudden medical emergency. Kelly was allegedly administered medication that had not been authorized by his medical team. The result was catastrophic. He collapsed, was rushed to the hospital, and treated for life-threatening blood clots. Doctors reportedly described the reaction as near fatal. Then, instead of being monitored in a medical unit or placed under protective custody, Kelly was returned directly to solitary confinement. All of this, his legal team says, occurred within a 72-hour window, a window that opened immediately after he exposed what he believed was an active plot to kill him. The filing cites multiple pieces of supporting material. Among them, medical records documenting the adverse reaction, internal transfer logs showing the abrupt move to isolation, and most controversially, a declaration from a prison gang leader who allegedly had direct knowledge of the plan. This declaration, according to the motion, confirms that discussions about eliminating Kelly took place and that correctional staff were aware. The Bureau of Prisons responded quickly, issuing a statement dismissing the allegations as a fanciful conspiracy. But notably, the response did not directly deny the Aryan Brotherhood connection. It did not explain the unauthorized medication. It did not address why Kelly was placed in solitary confinement immediately after hospitalization. Instead, it brushed the claims aside in broad terms and moved on. That silence is what Kelly's attorneys argue is most telling. If this were merely an inmate dispute, they argue, there would be no need for emergency isolation. If this were a medical mistake, there would be documentation and accountability. And if this were paranoia, there would be no corroborating declaration, no paper trail, no tightly aligned timeline. The real question, the filing suggests, is not whether Kelly is a sympathetic figure. He is not. But why a man already serving a lengthy sentence would suddenly become the target of such extreme measures at precisely the moment he began talking about people far more powerful than himself? This is where the narrative shifts. Kelly is not being portrayed as a victim of injustice for his past crimes. Those crimes are acknowledged. What his legal team is asserting instead is that his punishment was supposed to end the threat he posed. When it didn't, when it became clear he still possessed information capable of damaging others, the approach allegedly changed from incarceration to erasure. According to the motion, Kelly has knowledge of activities involving two men who spent decades operating in the shadows of the music industry, avoiding consequences while scandals followed them like rumors that never quite stuck. The filing does not name them publicly, but it makes clear that revealing their identities would trigger consequences far beyond Kelly himself. This, his attorneys argue, explains the urgency. You don't rush a prisoner back into isolation after nearly dying unless the goal is control. You don't involve prison gangs unless the objective is deniability. And you don't dismiss detailed allegations without rebuttal unless you're hoping the public won't look too closely. In this framing, Kelly's sentence was not the end. It was the beginning of a countdown. As long as he stayed silent, the system held. The moment he started speaking, the rules changed. And that's why the filing ends with a warning rather than a plea. The question, his lawyers argue, is not whether they can silence him. History suggests they might. The real question is what happens to the men whose names are buried in the files he's threatening to release if he doesn't survive long enough to testify. Because once a prisoner becomes a threat instead of a problem, the system doesn't negotiate. It eliminates.
That's part of the indictment. That's somewhat like a blackmail. He was blackmailing people to be in the freak-offs. So that's federal. That could be that's a federal charge. He can't blackmail people to say, yo, listen here, you did it once and you're gonna do it again. That ain't gonna make it with the government or nobody.
At first glance, the chain of events surrounding Kelly's recent health crisis could be written off as an unfortunate coincidence. A high-profile inmate experiences medical complications, requires hospitalization, and is placed in solitary confinement for his own safety. On the surface, it appears routine, bureaucratic, even predictable. But the timing and circumstances, according to his legal team and sources within the federal prison system, suggest something far more deliberate, calculated, and alarming. Kelly's filing does not merely describe a medical emergency, it paints a picture of orchestration. The sequence is precise. First, Kelly's lawyers submit a declaration exposing an alleged plot to silence him before he could share information about two influential figures who have spent decades shielding themselves from consequences. Then, within a mere 72 hours, Kelly suffers a near-fatal overdose, is rushed to a hospital for treatment of blood clots in his lungs, and is immediately placed back into solitary confinement, severed from communication with the outside world. That is not the behavior of randomness. That is coordination. The motion also includes a signed declaration from a gang leader, a detail that, by itself, would raise eyebrows in any court. This individual allegedly had direct knowledge of the plot, detailing how members of the Aryan Brotherhood were recruited to monitor, intimidate, and, if necessary, eliminate Kelly. The declaration, when combined with the sudden transfer to solitary confinement and the timing of the overdose, presents a compelling, albeit alarming, narrative. Kelly's attorneys argue that these events align too perfectly with his allegations to be dismissed as a coincidence. It's not just the timing that matters. It's what Kelly allegedly knows. Sources close to the situation insist that this is not about his long-ago convictions, crimes that the public has scrutinized extensively, and for which he is already serving a lengthy sentence. Instead, the concern lies in the names and networks he has reportedly been documenting over the last 6 months. Individuals who have carefully cultivated untouchable reputations for decades now find themselves potentially implicated. And according to the filing, those individuals are powerful enough to influence the very system in which Kelly is imprisoned. Those who follow hip-hop industry circles say the reaction from the Bureau of Prisons appears unusually scripted. The agency's response, labeling the claims a fanciful conspiracy, was delivered with a speed and precision that suggests prior preparation. Critics argue that a standard bureaucratic office does not usually respond to complex allegations within an hour of filing unless someone anticipated the situation or perhaps orchestrated the messaging in advance. Adding further weight to the concern is historical precedent. Insiders recall the 2004 Best of Both Worlds tour meltdown, which was widely portrayed as a clash of egos between two superstar performers. Kelly claimed he was physically assaulted backstage at Madison Square Garden by security personnel tied to Jay-Z's team after alleging that someone in the crew had brandished a firearm during his set. At the time, the story was dismissed publicly as a combination of temperamental clashes and logistical mismanagement. Privately, however, the narrative whispered through industry corridors suggested intimidation and premeditated suppression, elements that eerily mirror the current allegations regarding prison staff and gang involvement. The sequence of events is also difficult to reconcile with routine prison protocol. A near-fatal overdose would normally trigger extended hospitalization, frequent medical monitoring, and careful communication with attorneys and family. Instead, Kelly was returned to solitary confinement immediately following his discharge, effectively cutting off access to anyone outside the prison walls who might verify or challenge what had happened. Legal observers say that move serves only one purpose: containment. By isolating him, the authorities allegedly prevented further contact with individuals who might amplify his claims or alert media and oversight organizations to potential misconduct within the facility. Kelly's team emphasizes that the situation is compounded by the precise alignment of external events. 2 weeks before his collapse, Sean "Diddy" Combs was sentenced to 50 months in federal prison for transporting individuals across state lines for orchestrated encounters that prosecutors described as compromising. While Combs beat racketeering charges, the case hinged on testimony about multi-day gatherings where participants were allegedly administered substances without consent and filmed for leverage. Industry sources suggest Kelly was not merely a passive observer in these circles, but may have been present during the planning, aware of who was involved, and in possession of information that could extend far beyond the charges Combs ultimately faced. If true, Kelly's alleged involvement elevates the stakes from personal health and safety to systemic protection of influential figures. His legal filing argues that the intensity of the response, overdose, hospitalization, isolation, was less about managing Kelly as an individual inmate and more about containing the potential fallout of the knowledge he possesses. His lawyers point to medical records indicating that the medication administered during his collapse was neither authorized nor standard for his condition, suggesting intentional harm. Security logs documenting his transfer to solitary, combined with the precise timing of the incident, are presented as evidence of a pattern rather than an anomaly. Those who have worked within the system note that the speed, coordination, and selectivity of the actions taken against Kelly are highly unusual. Accidents happen in prison. Medical errors occur. Inmate disputes escalate. But rarely do such events converge in such a narrow window, with all signs pointing to deliberate interference from external parties. The legal team argues that Kelly's near-fatal incident cannot be explained by routine institutional error. The pattern suggests someone high up is actively managing or attempting to suppress a story that, if told, could implicate powerful people in the music industry and beyond. Adding further complexity is the ongoing silence from those traditionally in a position to respond. Jay-Z, who has been connected to Kelly's professional narrative since the 2004 tour and the subsequent events surrounding the documentary that damaged Kelly's reputation, has not publicly commented. Combs' legal team has focused solely on appeals and procedural matters, offering no acknowledgement of Kelly's allegations or the supposed orchestration of his overdose. The Bureau of Prisons dismissed the claims swiftly, but their statement failed to explain key anomalies, including the timing of the overdose, the isolation, and the gang involvement, all central to Kelly's legal argument. What begins to emerge, when the details are examined together, is a picture of orchestration. A man who once stood at the center of music industry attention, who has long been vilified for crimes that are now decades old, suddenly becomes the target of potentially lethal intervention. Not because of his past convictions, which are public knowledge, but because of the present danger posed by the knowledge he allegedly holds. Names, networks, recordings, and events that have been carefully hidden or protected by powerful figures may finally be at risk of exposure. And according to Kelly's filings, someone high enough in the system is intent on making sure that does not happen.
To still say allegedly, has done things and allegedly participated in a lot of things that the public would not be happy to.
To truly grasp the gravity of Kelly's current predicament, it's necessary to step back and examine the systemic forces at work. This isn't merely a case of one man facing consequences for his crimes or even one individual allegedly being targeted in prison. It is a reflection of an entertainment ecosystem that has, for decades, perfected the art of managing scandals, controlling narratives, and protecting its most influential players, even when those players themselves are guilty of crimes or misdeeds. Kelly's 30-year prison sentence, while framed publicly as accountability, was in reality the moment he transformed from a protected star to a liability. The very system that had shielded him for years now appeared determined to ensure he remained silent forever. The filings from Kelly's legal team make this clear. The allegations against prison officials aren't merely about negligence or mismanagement. They suggest a calculated orchestration that spans beyond the walls of his prison cell. The claim that Aryan Brotherhood members were recruited to handle him is not only alarming, but fits a historical pattern of silencing individuals who possess information too dangerous to be made public. According to Kelly's attorneys, this is about more than fear of him escaping or harming others. It is about preventing the revelation of names, activities, and networks that could unravel decades of carefully managed influence. The documents detail medical records indicating a near-fatal reaction to medication, logs showing his rapid transfer to solitary confinement, and even a declaration from a gang leader who claims first-hand knowledge of a plot designed to keep Kelly off the grid. Each element reinforces the notion that what occurred wasn't accidental. It was strategic, deliberate, and coordinated. Legal experts examining the filings note that the timing of events is particularly telling. Kelly's overdose and immediate isolation occurred just days after his lawyer submitted a declaration outlining threats against him, specifically naming connections between prison staff and external actors. This sequence mirrors events from his past career, moments when his threats to reveal damaging information were met with swift and decisive countermeasures. Consider the Best of Both Worlds tour collapse in 2004. Kelly accused Jay-Z's team of sabotaging his performance, resulting in him being pepper-sprayed backstage and removed from the venue. At the time, the public perception focused on artistic rivalry and personality clashes. In hindsight, it reads as a rehearsal for the type of suppression Kelly now alleges is being carried out within the prison system. Both incidents involve an individual perceived as a threat to the status quo and the rapid mobilization of forces designed to neutralize that threat before it can cause damage. The filings also contextualize Kelly's situation within the broader legal entanglements of other influential figures. 2 weeks before Kelly's prison ordeal, Sean "Diddy" Combs received a federal sentence for transporting individuals across state lines for illegal gatherings, activities allegedly involving non-consenting participants, and covert filming. Kelly's legal team hints at his potential awareness or even participation in these events, suggesting that the urgency in silencing him is not merely about his own past crimes, but about what he knows regarding others, individuals whose reputations, influence, and freedom could be jeopardized if Kelly speaks openly. Here, the pattern of protection and suppression becomes evident. The system does not merely punish wrongdoers, it protects its most influential figures while targeting those who possess knowledge that could disrupt carefully maintained power structures. Jay-Z's presence in this narrative further illuminates the systemic dynamics at play. From the failed 2004 tour to his alleged funding of the documentary that destroyed Kelly's career, Jay-Z's involvement reflects an ongoing strategy of control. These actions, framed publicly as business decisions or artistic ventures, functioned privately as tools of suppression. The documentary did not merely recount events, it actively shaped the narrative, casting Kelly in a negative light while protecting those with influence. By aligning legal, media, and artistic forces against him, the industry ensured Kelly remained isolated and silenced. Kelly's filings now suggest that the same tactics are being employed behind bars, using control, coercion, and threats to maintain dominance over information and influence. Moreover, the filings highlight the precise coordination required for such measures to succeed. The alleged recruitment of gang members, the medical interventions, and the rapid isolation cannot be interpreted as isolated misjudgments or errors. The legal documents detail a paper trail linking the timing of Kelly's hospitalization with the moment his allegations were officially submitted, indicating forethought and strategy. Security logs, hospital records, and sworn declarations all converge to depict a meticulously orchestrated attempt to suppress information. This is not merely a reactive system, it is proactive, preemptive, and designed to contain threats before they can be exposed to the public eye. Industry insiders emphasize that what makes Kelly's current filings particularly explosive is the breadth of information he reportedly possesses. These are not limited to events that led to his initial trials, but include private recordings, witness testimonies, and evidence from gatherings where participants assumed their actions would remain hidden. The implications are staggering. If even a fraction of these claims is verified, the fallout could extend far beyond Kelly, affecting the reputations, careers, and legal standing of some of the most powerful figures in music and entertainment. Critically, the filings illustrate the stakes beyond personal safety or reputation. They demonstrate the mechanisms of systemic protection, showing how the same forces that elevated stars to legendary status also wield immense influence to silence threats. The reaction to Kelly's submissions, the immediate dismissal by the Bureau of Prisons, the rapid isolation, and the alleged targeting by external actors exemplifies the lengths to which the system will go to preserve control. It is an ecosystem built on loyalty, leverage, and fear, where deviation from the script is met with calculated consequences. At the heart of Kelly's filings is a fundamental question: how far will those in power go? To truly grasp the gravity of Kelly's current predicament, it's necessary to step back and examine the systemic forces at work. This isn't merely a case of one man facing consequences for his crimes or even one individual allegedly being targeted in prison. It is a reflection of an entertainment ecosystem that has, for decades, perfected the art of managing scandals, controlling narratives, and protecting its most influential players, even when those players themselves are guilty of crimes or misdeeds. Kelly's 30-year prison sentence, while framed publicly as accountability, was in reality the moment he transformed from a protected star to a liability. The very system that had shielded him for years now appeared determined to ensure he remained silent forever. The filings from Kelly's legal team make this clear. The allegations against prison officials aren't merely about negligence or mismanagement. They suggest a calculated orchestration that spans beyond the walls of his prison cell. The claim that Aryan Brotherhood members were recruited to handle him is not only alarming, but fits a historical pattern of silencing individuals who possess information too dangerous to be made public. According to Kelly's attorneys, this is about more than fear of him escaping or harming others. It is about preventing the revelation of names, activities, and networks that could unravel decades of carefully managed influence. The documents detail medical records indicating a near-fatal reaction to medication, logs showing his rapid transfer to solitary confinement, and even a declaration from a gang leader who claims
I've been assassinated. I have been buried alive.
The narrative surrounding Kelly's current situation extends far beyond the walls of his prison cell. To understand the full scale of the crisis, it's essential to examine the intricate network of individuals and events that intersect in ways few in the public have fully grasped. This isn't merely a story of a convicted musician facing consequences or even of an alleged plot inside a federal prison. It's a larger, more alarming reflection of how power, influence, and silence operate in tandem to protect certain figures while systematically neutralizing potential threats. Each move, each timing, and each reaction appear meticulously calculated, and the dots, when connected, paint a far more complex picture than the casual observer realizes. One of the first points of attention is the sequence of events leading to Kelly's alleged overdose and isolation. The timing isn't accidental. Legal filings indicate that just days after Kelly submitted his latest declarations, exposing what he claims are deliberate attempts to silence him, he suffered a near-fatal reaction to medication and was immediately transferred to solitary confinement. On the surface, prison protocols could explain the transfer, but insiders and legal experts alike point out that the coincidence is too precise to ignore. The narrative surrounding Kelly's current situation extends far beyond the walls of his prison cell. To understand the full scale of the crisis, it's essential to examine the intricate network of individuals and events that intersect in ways few in the public have fully grasped. This isn't merely a story of a convicted musician facing consequences or even of an alleged plot inside a federal prison. It's a larger, more alarming reflection of how power, influence, and silence operate in tandem to protect certain figures while systematically neutralizing potential threats. Each move, each timing, and each reaction appear meticulously calculated, and the dots, when connected, paint a far more complex picture than the casual observer realizes. One of the first points of attention is the sequence of events leading to Kelly's alleged overdose and isolation. The timing isn't accidental. Legal filings indicate that just days after Kelly submitted his latest declarations, exposing what he claims are deliberate attempts to silence him, he suffered a near-fatal reaction to medication and was immediately transferred to solitary confinement. On the surface, prison protocols could explain the transfer, but insiders and legal experts alike point out that the coincidence is too precise to ignore. The events unfold as if scripted. Kelly files allegations implicating external actors. Within 72 hours, he experiences a medical emergency under suspicious circumstances. Shortly after, he is cut off from the outside world. When you layer this against the historical backdrop of Kelly's career, including the Best of Both Worlds tour in 2004, the lawsuits, and the documentaries that targeted him, the pattern becomes undeniable. Those in positions of power have historically moved quickly to suppress any threat to their narrative, and it appears the same dynamics are now playing out within the prison system. The first dot, as legal insiders describe it, is Sean Diddy Combs. His federal conviction for transporting individuals across state lines for illicit gatherings is more than an isolated legal case. The prosecution's documentation, testimony, and the details of multi-day events where participants were allegedly drugged and filmed without consent suggest a level of orchestration and influence that extends far beyond Combs himself. Kelly's filings imply that he is more than a peripheral witness. He is positioned at the center of knowledge regarding who is involved, when, and how. This is a critical distinction because it reframes the motivation behind the alleged attempt to silence him. This isn't about random inmate violence or general negligence. It's about preventing the revelation of connections that could implicate high-profile figures in serious criminal or ethically questionable behavior. Kelly, by virtue of being privy to this information, suddenly becomes a liability to a network that spans music, media, and entertainment. The second dot is Jay-Z, whose presence in the narrative dates back to the mid-2000s and beyond. The failed 2004 collaboration with Kelly, which culminated in the artist being pepper-sprayed backstage, is now being reinterpreted in light of Kelly's recent filings. Rather than a mere clash of egos or creative differences, this event is being viewed as a precursor, a test run of sorts, for more sophisticated suppression tactics. Kelly's subsequent legal actions, including a $75 million lawsuit, were quietly settled, and years later, the documentary that destroyed the remainder of his public image reportedly had financial backing from the same circles that had previously sought to control his narrative. These events illustrate a pattern. Kelly has repeatedly found himself at the intersection of legal, corporate, and media power, where his knowledge and potential influence were deemed dangerous enough to neutralize through coordinated efforts. Kelly's filings further suggest that the present situation is not merely reactive but proactive. By alleging that prison officials have recruited external actors, including Aryan Brotherhood members, the legal documents indicate that the network of influence extends both inside and outside prison walls. This implies a high level of coordination and access, reinforcing the notion that the individuals allegedly trying to suppress Kelly have both motive and means. Legal experts reviewing the filings emphasize the sophistication of such coordination. Medical interventions appear intentionally timed, transfers to solitary confinement were executed rapidly, and sworn declarations have been obtained to corroborate claims of external involvement. The combined effect is a chilling message to Kelly: do not speak, or there will be consequences. Beyond the immediate threats, the filings also highlight the broader ecosystem in which these events are unfolding. The entertainment industry, particularly at the level Kelly operated, has long demonstrated an ability to control narratives, shield influential figures, and systematically silence those who threaten exposure. This control operates through multiple channels: media campaigns, strategic lawsuits, influence over legal proceedings, and, according to Kelly's claims, even manipulation within prison systems. The filings suggest that Kelly's recent experiences are the latest manifestation of these dynamics, a continuation of the same pattern that allowed powerful figures to maintain dominance for decades. The difference now is that Kelly is publicly asserting knowledge that could disrupt this carefully maintained structure. Another key point in the filings is the alleged presence of evidence and witness testimonies that extend far beyond Kelly's own involvement. Legal sources indicate that these materials may include recordings, detailed accounts of events, and corroborating testimony that implicates multiple high-profile individuals. This is significant because it frames the issue not as Kelly's isolated history of misconduct, but as a systemic problem. A network of individuals who have long operated above scrutiny and are now facing the potential exposure of decades-long secrets. It also explains the intensity and immediacy of the response. The alleged overdose, the medical intervention, and the isolation are not random acts. They are preventative measures designed to disrupt the dissemination of sensitive information. In addition to the external dots, the filings shed light on internal dynamics within the prison system itself. The claim that staff members were involved in coordinating threats against Kelly suggests a level of complicity that goes beyond ordinary bureaucratic negligence. If true, this would represent a dangerous intersection between correctional authority and external power networks, a combination capable of exerting immense pressure on an individual attempting to expose information. Legal analysts note that such coordination is rare and indicates a high-stakes scenario where those involved believe that silence is paramount and that any deviation could have catastrophic consequences for their influence and freedom. Finally, Kelly's situation underscores a broader commentary on the nature of power and accountability within high-profile industries. The pattern revealed through the filings, from Diddy to Jay-Z, from media suppression to
respect a response, and again, hindsight, a lot of people don't, people say, well, if I was Jay-Z, I would have done this, but you're not. And I gotta say this, you're not. So you don't know the situation.
The legal filing didn't slip quietly into the system. It landed on the federal docket at exactly 4:37 p.m. Eastern Time, and within minutes, it began circulating through legal and industry back channels. By 5 p.m., according to multiple sources close to the defense, it was already clear that the situation was far more serious than the initial summary suggested. This was not a routine complaint about prison conditions. It was a direct accusation that Kelly's life had been deliberately put at risk. According to his attorneys, Kelly was not found suffering from a random medical emergency. He was discovered unconscious in his cell after what they describe as an intentional overdose, one that required immediate hospitalization and emergency intervention. Doctors allegedly treated him for blood clots in his lungs, a condition that can turn fatal within minutes if left unchecked. The defense claims medical staff confirmed the reaction was extreme and inconsistent with his approved treatment plan. What happened next is what raised alarms. Rather than remaining under medical supervision, Kelly was returned to prison custody and placed directly into solitary confinement. No step-down care. No observation period. No explanation that satisfied his legal team. The entire sequence, collapse, hospitalization, isolation, unfolded within a narrow 72-hour window. That window matters. Because, according to the filing, it opened just days after Kelly's lawyers submitted a declaration alleging that correctional officers had actively coordinated with members of the Aryan Brotherhood to ensure Kelly would not live long enough to testify or disclose further information. The motion does not rely on vague claims. It names a specific gang affiliation, references a written statement from an inmate with alleged direct knowledge of the plot, and documents the sudden shift in Kelly's confinement status. This is where the narrative moves beyond negligence and into intent. The defense argues that if this were merely a medical error or an inmate dispute, there would be no reason to isolate Kelly immediately after he survived a near-fatal incident. Isolation, they claim, serves one purpose: to cut communication. To prevent access to attorneys, media, and outside oversight during a critical period. What's being whispered in legal circles is that this reaction had nothing to do with Kelly's past crimes. Those have been public knowledge for years. What changed, sources say, is what he has allegedly been discussing privately over the last 6 months: names, events, and connections that extend far beyond his own case. The Bureau of Prisons responded swiftly, labeling the allegations a fanciful conspiracy. But critics note how fast that response came and what it didn't address. There was no denial of gang involvement. No explanation for the medication discrepancy. No justification for the transfer to solitary confinement. That speed, according to people familiar with institutional crisis management, often signals preparation, not surprise. And for those who followed Kelly's history closely, the situation feels disturbingly familiar. The last time he claimed forces were closing in on him after he threatened to expose powerful figures wasn't inside a prison cell. It was in 2004, during the infamous Best of Both Worlds tour, when he alleged backstage intimidation after accusing someone connected to the production of pulling a firearm on him. Back then, the story was buried. Now, the defense argues it's happening again, only this time, the stakes aren't his career. They're his life.
And I'm not saying allegedly.
Oh. Okay,
I'm saying, Sean Carter, you're a piece of shit. Taking Pimp C wasn't bad enough. You just want to go down there and you want to just remove all of the balls from every real gangster in Houston.